Hi friends, it's Walter Zemrock here with a really fun project today. I purchased the beautiful, and really large Sakura Blossoms stamp set from Altenew. It's absolutely beautiful. And as you can see, the main image is quite large. You wouldn't get the full thing onto a card. But it's so pretty as is in its entirety. So I have a project in which I'm going to be using the whole main blossom piece here, that branch and all of those beautiful flowers. I'm going to be doing some background stenciling using the Paper Echoes stencil. And I'm going to be using this scroll kit. It's simply, this came from Amazon. It is a kit of 12 pieces of this particular paper, which has some adhesive already there for winding around your two wooden dowels that will act as the top and the bottom. Because what I'm making is, do you know those old looking scrolls that, you see artwork on over the centuries? Especially there would be some beautiful Japanese ones. And also you would see, like, in a medieval type of movie, like a Robin Hood, they'd unroll the scroll. And so it's going to be a scroll like that that's going to have the picture. And you're going to be able to hang it. We can use some twine that also comes with it. Could also cut a bigger piece of your own twine if you need a bigger piece. But essentially, as I was saying, this came from Amazon. It came in a kit of 12. You get 12 sets of the dowels, 12 pieces of the paper. And this stamp set will fit perfectly on there with enough room for rolling. And it's going to give it a really older look, which I think is going to be gorgeous. And it's going to become a piece of art that you can hang, a piece of decor that you can hang. I think it would be beautiful in a home office, or even like out on a 4-season, 3-season porch, wherever you'd like. Because after all, art is very subjective and everybody likes something different. And this is something that you may want to hang proudly within your home. So we're going to be using this scroll kit. And to do my stamping, as well as to add some grunge to the paper to further age it, I'm going to be using some of these beautiful brown shades: Deep Spice, Toasted Paprika, and Earthy Rose from Altenew. Luckily for us, the stamp wheel is large enough, the 2.0, to accommodate a larger paper. And you can remove that side, which I'll go over when I get my stamp wheel out, to have the paper hang off, which is fantastic. And it's also large enough to accommodate this particular stamp, so that you can get a nice, beautiful, even stamp using your stamp wheel, which will be perfect for this project. So without further ado, let's jump on in. Start by removing that sidebar from your stamp wheel 2.0 and aligning your paper onto the pad. You'll then grab your stamp and align it on the paper to make sure that you're happy with its placement. I like to try to make sure that it's kind of centered, since it is a really big and long piece of paper. And then pick up the stamp with your stamp wheel cover. Ink up the stamp. I am using the darker of the brown shades and making sure there's a lot of nice coverage on there. And then make sure that your stamp wheel's in alignment, the plate and the body of it, and then press down to ensure a nice crisp stamp. Perfect. I think it looks really good. The Altenew coloring stencil for this particular set makes coloring so quick and so easy. For my Sakura blossoms, I'll be using Pink Pearl, Blush, Blush Rose, and Dusty Pink. I begin with my first color, and after aligning my stencil, go ahead and start to fill in with my blending brush. Going over each of those individual petals, knowing that the rest of the image is protected since only those individual petals are cut out. It does take a couple of minutes to go ahead and work your way around the entire image, but it's a good workout. And I have a tendency to go back over images just to make sure that I'm happy with the amount of ink that's laid down. But it really does move along pretty smoothly as you go over each of those petals. I then grab stencil number 2 and align it onto my stamped image. And then come in with my next color and go over each of those petals. Again, you can go over them a few times. Really, it's however you like your ink blended image to look. I like to make sure that it's a nice, vibrant blend, so I have a tendency to go over a few times. But I think it's time well invested because at the end of the day, you're going to ensure that all of your blossoms look really, really pretty and that you are happy with the amount of ink and saturation on the image. And let's face it, this is a big project, so you want to make sure that you're happy with every aspect of it. And that blend looks really good as well. So I grab Stencil 3 and align it onto the stamped image. And then I come in with my next shade of pink and move along all of those petals. Happily ink blending. Luckily, there's not as many petals on this particular stencil, so it does go a little bit more quick than the prior ones. Very happy with how it looks, so I take Stencil 4 and align it. And then I take my fourth shade of pink and come in and blend over each of those petals. Again, there are fewer petals on this particular stencil, so it moves along pretty quickly. I then grab Stencil 5, which is coloring the centers of the flowers, adding in some really nice dots, as well as some of your leaves and some of your branch. And I come in with my first of my green colors and go over the centers and ink blend those in, ink blend the leaves, and I do blend the branches as a green to start. You'll see then that I have an additional step, but just know that the green on the branch is intentional, and I am quite happy with how it turns out. After done with the green, I grab my toasted paprika and just tap some brown highlights over the green branches to make it a nice rich color. I then grab stencil number 6 and align it on my image. And I take my second shade of green and go over those leaves and the other parts of the branches that weren't covered by the previous stencil. Once again, I'm going to do an additional step and add some brown in once I'm done with this, the stenciling of the green color. And I take my brown brush with the toasted paprika and tap on those additional details and highlights onto the branch. I am super happy with how this looks. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I now grab some pink and green Altenew artist markers and just go around any of the edges that I may have missed with my ink blending and fill in any little holes that may exist. This is an optional step, but I think it's time worth spent making sure that the image is completely colored and just correcting for anything that didn't get blended the first time. And then I do the same with a dark shade of green along the leaves and along the branches. Again, sometimes your stencil may not be perfectly aligned with your stamped image, and that's okay, because you can then take a marker and come in and fill in those spots, and no one will be any of the wiser. I could have left this step out of the video and you wouldn't even know that I had to do it. But I wanted to share it because, let's face it, it's something we all encounter from time to time when stenciling, and there's an easy fix for it. Now that I'm happy with my stamped image, I grab my stencil with the writing on it and adhere it down onto the paper, and then come in with my lightest shade of brown ink and just blend over the stencil to give the indication that there's a little bit of writing in the background, because I think that's a really nice touch on an older image like this, and especially when using a scroll. It just gives that really cool vintage old aesthetic to your project. You could leave it out, but I highly recommend adding it in. And then I align the stencil down below, and I do move it over a bit to make it look like the writing is kind of staggered coming down the scroll. And I stencil in my second portion of writing. Next, I turn the paper over and I take not the darkest brown, but the next one down, and I go ahead and blend over the ends of the paper. And then I come in, I do each side, then I come in with a lighter shade and blend it all together. I don't go over the complete back, just that little bit at the beginning. And the reason for adding this is when I roll the scroll over the wooden dowel that will be at the top and the bottom of it, as you roll the paper, it just has that aged look to it, which I think is a really cool and important detail. I flip the paper back over and I take my darkest shade of brown and rub it along those edges just to again make it look like it's aged and kind of give that little bit of a scorched look. I then come in with some shades of brown to add some additional grunge and age features around the edges. I like to have dark on each of the edges and then go lighter in as I get towards the actual image. I think that a gradual look kind of makes it look more naturally aged, especially since if you're handling a piece like this, chances are you are handling the sides when you pick it up. And that's where the oils from your finger, the dirt, will go ahead and would have naturally gotten onto this aged document. And so that's where you would expect the most wear and tear to be. And then I just take some lighter shades and come in and go over the entire inside just to again add a light bit of aging and grunge to the inside part of the image. This is completely optional. You may want to do this, you may not. I happen to be someone who absolutely loves adding grunge to things. I just think it makes it look so cool to be able to take a new piece of paper and make it look this old. I then take some paintbrushes and some dark brown ink. I spray some water onto that ink to create a nice brown watercolor, and I add in some splatter. The purpose of this is to kind of give that, again, age spots, but also potential water spots from over the years. Once I'm done with my splatter, I spray it lightly with some water. And that's just to activate all of that grunge ink and let it come together and soften it up a bit. And then I dry it with a hair dryer. And this just gives that natural look of when paper is wet and you dry it. It kind of changes the texture a bit, as well as altering the effect of that grunge. It makes it look natural, and I just really love this effect. I now start to prepare my wooden dowels. I want them to look a little bit older as well. So I take a dark brown ink and I blend it over the circular tip as well as slightly down on each end. And then I grab a rag and I wipe off any excess ink so that it doesn't go ahead and mark up my really beautiful stamped image or cause any issues for me. And then I repeat and do the same thing for the second dowel. And I just come down slightly on each end and then grab my rag and wipe it off. I take my piece of twine and I tie it onto one end and kind of fray the end to make it look a little bit older. And then I tie it to the other end of the dowel and do the same thing to fray the end and make it look a little bit older. I put some craft glue right up against the circle at the top of the dowel and press the twine against it to help hold that in place. And I repeat and do the same thing on the other end. I remove that strip of adhesive from the paper, set my dowel down into place, centering it onto my paper, and press it down. And once happy, I start to carefully roll it so that it starts to adhere. I then grab some glue and put some glue down on the paper right up against the dowel and a little bit on the dowel, and I roll that to continue to get the paper to adhere to the dowel. You can add more glue with each time you roll it just to make sure that it's going to remain secure in place. I then do the same thing with the other end. The nice thing is you don't have to worry about the twine on this end. So I went ahead and removed that piece of adhesive backing, added some glue, and put my dowel into place and started to roll up that end of the scroll. Again, adding some glue as I went along to make sure that it's going to stay securely in place. I do recommend that you do this step really carefully and slow because it's very easy for the paper to kind of become uneven as you roll. And just like that, our stamped Sakura Blossom scroll is complete. Isn't it beautiful? Thanks so much for spending this time with me today. I enjoyed this project and I hope that you do as well. See you soon.